And finally this week, the absolutely fabulous actress Jane Horrocks vowed never to perform Shakespeare's works again, claiming they're inaccessible to modern audiences. The 47-year-old said, although she risked sounding stupid, she'd never loved Shakespeare and found the 17th century playwright's language hard to understand. So I asked my lovely listeners how they felt about the works of the bard. Horace told me he found Shakespeare inspirational.
Well, I'm astonished by Jane Horrocks because she's a comedy actress.
Yes.
And the bit of writing that I do is mostly comedy, and I get so much inspiration from Shakespeare. And I'm amazed that Jane Horrocks, of all people, I've seen her in Little Voice and absolutely fabulous and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just truly astonished that she doesn't like Shakespeare.
You see, some people would be astonished that as a comedy writer you get your inspiration from Shakespeare, because even the most avid and the most passionate Shakespeare devotees often find his comedy a really tough stretch.
Well,
you're meant to laugh, but you look at it and think, well, I don't think that's funny at all.
Well, at the moment, I'm actually looking in front of me. I'm looking at a story that is one of the first short stories I ever wrote, and it was about Shakespeare, and you're in it as well. It's about a chap composing a poem while he's listening to you, and he kind of butchers the poem a little bit, but I think there is a lot of humour in Shakespeare.
Are you going to give us just a little?
Well, I can give you
a chunk, not too much, a little bit.
No, I'll just give you the line where he speaks to Vanessa, or sends the poem to Vanessa.
Yes.
Shall I compare thee to a lemon? Thou art far more bitter. Shall I pretend you are the perfect kitten in the litter? If I could be with you for just 1 hour, it would be just 1 hour too long. From that first moment when we married in Hong Kong, where did we go, Susie Wong?
Oh dear, oh dear.
And only recently in the Hemel Hempstead Gazette, that's the big paper around here, they printed a poem of mine about Posh and Becks.
Yes.
And it was all about, Romeo, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And, it just started off with something like Romeo, Daddy dear, said Romeo, in 2022, what team shall I play for? Now I've grew as big as you. And at the end, of course, Sir David, as he was then in the poem,
yes,
he said, he told him not to wear 7 or 23, but to wear 4 out there, Romeo.
Oh,
okay.
Well, I mean, that was not bad. That was not bad at all. Not bad at all.
But that story with you in it, I can send that to you if I could.
Do it.
I'll send it to you, yeah.
Love to read it, although it wasn't particularly flattering. Shall I compare thee to a lemon? I don't know, but
it's because you'll see in the story, because it's about his ex-wife who's left him.
Oh, I see. Well, okay. Well, I won't take it personally anyway. I'm delighted to be included in any works of literature.
No, you're not.
Huge compliment.
You're not being compared to the lemon. He's just listening to you on the radio and sending this poem about his wife.
Good. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Would you know the rest of it? If I asked you to recite it, do you know the poem?
Well, it's about the buds of May and all that.
It really is. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. And I haven't got this in front of me. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yes, yeah,
and I say that every day. I say that to the wife. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
What does she say?
Well, she says something like, no, I prefer if you compared me to something else.
John in Bromley disagreed. He said Shakespeare's boring and the language is too complicated.
Can't stand it. So boring. It really is boring. The stories are stupid. I had to write the 12th night out when I was at school in modern day English, and it's pathetic. It really is. I mean, what sort of language is, oh, Malvolio, wherefore art thou, Malvolio? I mean, what can it just say? Malvolio, where are you?
Because if you had said in the 17th century the sorts of things that people say these days, like what's your take on it, or that's my brother in it, nobody would have understood what you were talking about. The reason he didn't write then as you speak now is because people spoke in different ways, and also he was a poet, wasn't he? He wasn't writing down ordinary speech in the dullest and most pedestrian way. Think of the inane way that most people speak these days. You wouldn't want to thinking, well, sit through a play of that either. Might as well watch EastEnders.
Well, there's no comparison, is there, with EastEnders? I don't think so. And this thing that actors got, you can't say Macbeth.
Don't say it. You know you're not meant to say the Scottish play. Desperately unlucky. You know that.
How pathetic you say it, you know?
Well, we know it's steeped in thespian lore, LORE, that one doesn't say that kind of thing anywhere near a dressing room. But seriously, though, do you really think that Shakespeare plays are stupid? You've never, I mean, for example, the plot of, let's say, for example, the Scottish play. All about ambition, all about doing things you know are wrong, all about, evil and the forces of darkness. I mean, if you've been, following the Rupert Murdoch story, I mean, you could say that, Murdoch and Brooks, blimey, the three witches of Macbeth reincarnated. Hubble, bubble, toil and trouble, eye of newt and toe of frog, blimey. The three of them, as they went into the committee, didn't they look exactly like the three witches? Wasn't it all happening? So foul and fair a day I have not seen. Caw! It was just like that.
Well, you put up an excellent defence, Vanessa, and I will admit, Macbeth, that's not too bad, that one, but the rest of it...
Okay, what about Hamlet? Hamlet's a magnificent play. Hamlet, God, of course I do. I really, really do. There's shivering filaments of incest. There's unbelievable jealousy. There's total corruption. What about something is rotten in the state of Denmark? Couldn't you say that about London? Couldn't you say that about the UK? You would certainly say that about America. You could say that about virtually everywhere.
You could. His
father's untimely death. His mother cops off with his uncle. The people all over London listening now, his mothers have copped off with their uncle, thinking, hang on a minute, wait a second. The play within the play, blimey, Ophelia absolutely going right off her head, totally doolally. The whole thing's magnificent.
You can't...
And boring, no, it can't be. Nobody could ever say it was boring. It's far too, with all that psychological verisimilitude. It really is very... And also, what about Othello, for God's sake? God, fantastic. Misplaced jealousy and all that. Racism. It's like an ordinary day in Brixton. It's an ordinary day in most of London.
You can't convince me otherwise, but I'll grant you Macbeth, though.
And John in Dulwich told me how Shakespeare's plays and sonnets have been a great comfort to him.
Yeah, fantastic. A great solace and comfort to me, actually. I mean, I left a school, the same school that Ken Livingstone went to, actually, with no qualifications at all. But I used to go with my sister to the Academy Cinema on Oxford Street when that was there, and I saw those films, and I just had some skills with reading and writing, and I wanted to perform, and it didn't work out, and I've become a taxi driver. But I've just found such solace in it. And the chap who was on just now, I'd love to go, actually, if he'd like me to take him, I'd love to go and see Much Ado About Nothing again.
Yes.
I went there where I was Friday, about 3 weeks ago on a Friday. It was just such a laugh. It was wonderful. I didn't know it.
It's Beatrice and Benedict, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
And they've got this very sparry, I would say it's a bit like, you can correct me if you don't agree, but a little bit like the sort of Spencer Tracy, Catherine Hepburn film relationship. Sparky, badinage, caustic, it's all that kind of thing, isn't it?
It's so funny. I mean, I'd love to go with this chap, because I do feel for him. I really do feel for him. I mean, language and music were things that I was any good at, but it didn't get me any Olos, unfortunately. But and here I am doing this. But I do feel for him on that. And there's so many expressions, there's reams of expressions that we all know about, but so many wonderful things. And I found great solace in it. Even the sonnets. I mean, there's the sonnets, a lot of solace there. And and there's so much that we come across in history, lines that we take for granted. Even once on a John Wayne film, he wakes up in the morning and he kicks the ashes over the fire. They're out in the prairie, and he says, "Come on, man, we're burning daylight." I thought, that's a great phrase. Blow me down. It comes up in a Shakespeare play.
Really? I didn't even know that.
We're burning daylight. And I thought, good Lord. Yeah. And so much there. But, I found it a great solace. And it's one of the things that I, in my annual pilgrimage to the Globe, I just think it was so miraculous and when they discovered it. And one of the wonderful things that I remember so vividly, because I was working and driving around a lot then as a motorbike dispatch rider. And there was a chap who was a baddie in a James Bond film. Chap, he was had a dagger in his boot and he was going to kick somebody. He was one of the Smirch characters. And he was sitting the wrong way round on a chair outside with a handheld megaphone, announcing to people who wanted to pass by the site that they had just come to a point in the excavations where they had found a compacted layer of hazelnuts. And they knew that must be where the groundling stood. because that was the popcorn of the day.
Yeah, that was a bit where you were chucking your nuts on the floor, the shells of your nuts,
you
of course.
dropped the shells on the floor, and they found this compacted layer there, and they thought, this is it, this is where they stood.
How exciting.
It was fantastic.
Absolutely brilliant. And you know, watching Much Ado About Nothing, I bet that there were bits that you didn't necessarily understand, because the comedy is hard to twig. It's just like today's shows. You're making some joke about Esther Ranson's teeth or something. If you scroll forward 100 years, no one knows what you're talking about. It's a bit like that, sort of. But it doesn't mean you don't enjoy the play, does it?
That's right. And in fact, and in the Globe, fair enough, there are times when you can't hear, especially when they're talking across the stage and you're on the other side. But, you know, as Shakespeare said, you know, kindly see our play, not to hear it all. You won't hear it all. I mean, okay, there weren't planes coming into Heathrow then, but I mean, there was these wonderful moments when, you know, Benedict, he's being so standoffish and such a bloody snob, and there are women, there are young girls in the audience shouting, "Kiss him, for God's sake, kiss him!" You know? And it was.
I went to see Othello once in Manchester, and people were yelling from the audience, "Don't do it! No, don't do it!" There was lots of that going on. I don't know. So I mean, that has to be gripping if people can be bothered to yell, doesn't it?
Oh, it's lovely, and they interacted with the audience so well. You know, they looked both, and they looked askance sideways at the audience, like stand-up comedians looking. Shall I? What? You're joking? Shall I? No. And it was wonderful. The interplay, and it was great. Do go and see it. The gentleman who was on before. Do go and see Much Ado. Take some folks with you, and it's just such a laugh. It was brilliant.
So that's all for this week. Thanks for listening. You can catch me every day, Monday to Friday, from 9 till 12 on BBC London 94.9.